Good day guys, welcome to UnityAdventures. Today I'm going to show you some obvious basics about the layout and the buttons within Unity. So this video is not intended for the day-to-day Unity users, however it is for the absolute beginners from start to an average user. So before I quickly jump into it, please remember to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for the reminders if you want any future videos, maybe drop a comment what you would like to see next and we'll maybe focus on that. Unity, and then we're going to click on new project. So the project can be 2D or 3D. This makes no difference in hindsight, it's just the settings internally on the program itself. So first thing you want to do is name it whatever you would like. That's entirely up to you for future references. And then the location. Do ensure you have a lot of space, because some of these games can be pretty big. That's important. And then we move on to the top left of the screen. I'm going to go through all these if we can, or as much as I can. If I miss anything, please let me know. The top ones, as you can see, was just controls, and then moving on to this one is shading. So the shading itself, if you follow it down, you can see a bunch of other things. It's pretty much how you view your viewport. The viewport is what you're looking at now, which is the view of your scene, which you can put wireframe, or when you get more into game development, it does come in handy to use that shaded tool, so you can see things in a different perspective. And then you've got 2D, which I'm clicking here, which obviously just puts it into a 2D mode, which is ideal for making 2D games. And moving forward is the lighting. So the lighting itself, it doesn't affect too much until you put much more lighting into the scene itself. So obviously you can turn up the intensity, you can change the colour, you can pretty much do anything you like with the lighting, depending on how you want it. If you want a horror scene, you might need to dimmer it, and just keep playing with it. To be honest, it's a hit and miss. Okay, and next you got audio, which is pretty simple. Just switch on and off. That's only editing audio. Once you compile the game, it will not affect anything that way. Okay. So as you can see, I've got that little eye. What that eye does is it makes it hidden. It's still there, but it's just hidden, so you don't want to see it. If you've got 5 buildings and you're working on the one, you might not want to view them all. So you just take away the 4 and work with the 1. And then you have a little finger, as you can see in the hierarchy. That little finger stops you from selecting it, so you're unable to click on it until you untick it like so, which is really handy, because I'm getting fed up sometimes of constantly clicking the screen about 3 times to find something that I actually want, and then I click past it, which does happen quite often. The next one here is a grid. Obviously, if you want a grid, how you want your grid, what angle, which is good to work in as a floor kind of thing, because otherwise you'll be working in thin air. It can come in handy for some games, especially tall games, certainly. Okay, so moving over, you got tools. Tools is no use to us as of yet. You have to download them through packages. And then you got the cameras. As you can see, the camera, you got field of view, which is only your field of view, not the in-game field of view. Doesn't affect the camera itself. It's just a viewport camera. And then you can see this one here, Occlusion Culling, which is very important. If you got 10 buildings, 5 in front, 5 behind, you can choose not to render the ones at the back, which is what that button will do. Belongs you independently select the options on each building as well. And then you got Gizmos. Gizmos here itself, you can just have a look through, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You just click and highlight the things that you do not want to see on the scene. It doesn't affect the outcome of the game at all. It's just, it saves you looking at a whole bunch of things on the screen when you don't really want to. Concentrate on one thing at a time. That's the motto. Okay, so just want to quickly show you one other thing where you can move around the scene if you want to. You can play around with it. You can have any layout which you wish. It's entirely up to you how you feel comfortable, and all depending on what you're working on. If you're working on animation or anything like that, you can alter it. But if you go to the top right here, you can see there's some preset ones. You can also make your own. And if you do lose a window, just press default or revert to factory settings, and it will fix everything back to its place. And this is how I have it at the moment. And at the top you got scene, and then you got game. So game there is the view that you're going to be, as soon as you press play, that's the view you're going to see. So that's your in-game playing view at the moment. So we can see here, I press play, and we got nothing because we've made nothing at all. Then you got stats here, which can be important to see how your game's running and if there's any stress on your computer, etc., or on the game itself. You don't want too many moving objects in the view. Now I just want to quickly show you, you got your project manager here, and then you got the asset store. Now you can get many things from the asset store simply by clicking on it, and then you click search now, and then this will take you straight to the asset store. Now the asset store is responsible for most of the in-game objects which you want to implement. If you choose to go that way, saves a lot of time. There's a lot of good content on there. So I've already downloaded something called standard assets, which I recommend you to do just for the basics. And then you go down onto this menu and you click to my assets, and then you should have standard assets in here. I've got a bit too many, so I need to load the rest. So if you go down and find standard assets, which is here, it's important that you make sure they are up to date with your version of Unity, otherwise we could run into problems. This is the one I've got at the moment, and once you've got it, normally you would click download, which I already have downloaded it. Now I just have to import it into my project. Now once the import is done, it will come up like this, and you can deselect anything that you do not wish to bring forward into your project to save room and unnecessary items. But I'm going to take them all like so. And then there's a quick run around on the registry manager, which is quite handy. It's got a few AR functions, it's got VR functions, all these and plugins like extensions, and some useful things on here, which universal RP, which comes help when you're doing your lighting. So yeah, you definitely should check those out once you get into it. And then once I've done that, I'm going to go back to the main game, and as you can see, standard assets is down in the bottom left on my assets. So if you have a little look, you can see there's a bunch of folders with already set assets which you do not need to create because they already created. And then you can just have a look through them and see what you like. You can even make a little game out of them. There's enough there to make a mini game, which is pretty cool. So that is basically how to get a game on there, or assets on there. And now I just want to show you the hierarchy, how it works. So if you got, for instance, a main camera, you want two cameras, you can just duplicate it, copy, paste, whichever is easier, or you can create a new one. It's not a problem. And I can create, it says, call it camera 1 and call that camera 2. And then in the game, for instance, if I use a script, I could tell the script that halfway through the game I want you to switch to camera 2, or when I'm in a certain zone, I want you to move to camera 2, and that camera 2, yeah, you can ask it to follow a certain character, etc. Or you don't need to have two cameras, you can have one and just move it. It's not a problem. All it takes is a bit of scripting. You can get most of it off YouTube tutorials, no problems at all. So I want to look through the list here. So the list that we got is things that we can add. So just a quick selection here. If you click on there, the item, you can always place any item you want inside of another item, so then it becomes its parent and the item becomes its child, or you can drag and drop and it'll do the same thing. Now a child will, for instance, if you move the position of the child, it will move, but if you move the position of the adult, all the children, as we call them, would move together rather than independently. So that can come in use, and it can come in use for many other things. If you put a camera on a player, for instance, or the other way around, you could move your player and the camera will move with it. That makes sense. So that there's a lot of things that can be useful with that. And have a look down the list here, the things that we can add many different objects. Some items you can create yourself through Blender, which I tend to do because I'm a little bit long-winded when it comes to making my own items. There's a few physics things, there's lights, there's many different lights you can add, which is really good to play with. I use pretty much about 3 or 4 of these for different games, 2D games, things like that. They are pretty cool. And then you can add your own sound. If you just add your sound, you don't have to add it like this. You can go into the cube itself. Let me just delete this. And then you can go into the cube itself, go down to the bottom, and then you got add component, and then you can add your own audio. So that's another way to do it. Video, which is pretty self-explanatory. Add your own little videos, etc. And UI is very important. That's your pause menus, that's your click-ins, that's your drags, your inventories, anything like that you need to create through UI. That's the easiest way to do it. And the last one was camera, which we already have. And then moving on to this side is the inspector. So if you look through the inspector, we can see a bunch of things. I've just named my block as a tag, and the tag name was player. So if I were to make a script and put anything that comes in contact with player will explode, and anything that does come in contact with player will explode. So that's what that can do. Layers, if you can see here, you got layers. You can select water, for instance, and if a player goes into the water will not take effect. The player will not take effect, so you will not walk across it. But if you drop a donut on it, for instance, that could float. So that's where that can come in use. Things can ignore other things, kind of thing. And then you've got your positions. So transform is your positioning, and movement in general. So you've got a few things here. You've got position, X, Y, Z, and rotation, and then finally you got a scale. And there's a few settings here which you can use if you want to copy one cube to another cube. I know you can just duplicate it, but you can copy some components and not the others. And you can reset its position on everything. Try to keep in the positives, not the minus, especially when you're using the scale, because then you could have a few problems. And mesh is basically what it is at the moment. So at the moment it's just a mesh. So think of it as like a solid cube. You could change it through Blender, not a problem, and bring its own meshes in. And then you got the mesh renderer, which is what you want the cube to look like. So you could change the picture of the cube, and if you look for the materials here, and we can use that material or drag it onto there, it doesn't matter. And then that will basically not look too good, but you can edit it. But size here, if you go on size, then you can put different materials. There's a few different materials on the same object, which can be a little tricky to get right sometimes. I don't really do too much of that at the moment. But you can pretty much drag most things on there. Anything that's not got a normal map, which I'll show you what that is in a minute, they will just sit on lovely, depending on what it's made with and what it's made for. And then you can, we'll go through that in a minute. And then we go down, you've got lighting, you've got a few settings here, which we don't really mess with unless you want to do like the final touches on a game, and then you can start messing. yeah, which is ideal then. There's a few other settings which you can just tamper with, probes, additional settings. You got things like that occlusion culling, which will make it not be rendered until it's in the view. Sometimes you see on games where there's something at the back and it's not rendered, and that's because of that. Box collider is its physical box, so if you take the box collider off, a ball for instance will go straight through it. Or if you put is a trigger, that will still also go through it. So sometimes you have to make two boxes. One box is a trigger and one's not a trigger, and that way if the ball hits it, it'll react and it'll break, depending on how you want it to react. And then you got material, which is its physical side. So what is it? Is it bouncy? Is it icy, etc.? Moving down to the materials, which we mentioned earlier, we did drag this material in and it didn't look too good. So to make it look a little bit better, you open the menu and then you go down and you can see there's two. So this one here is basically your base. It has no base, but it does have this normal map here, which is this light blue, which gives it its 3D effect. Without the normal map, it wouldn't look 3D. It would look pretty much flat. As you can see, these settings itself is not fixing it. So there is another way that I can fix it. And as you see, these two settings at the top, no good messing with these at all. They don't do anything. Where the ones at the bottom, because there's a bit of texture on it, it will move the texture to somewhat. And then you got the shininess, and then you got the height. The height is the one that gives it the growth from the cube, which are lifted up. It can come in use in some things. If you want them 3D, you know, like walls with rocks, and you want them to pop out, as long as you've got the right normal map. So as you can see here, I'm moving around the tiles and I'm trying to get it how I feel is good. And at the very bottom, just to quickly show you, you can add components and you can add pretty much anything you want. Effects, audio, there's loads of different things with audio. For instance, you got like reverb zones where you walk close, you hear it, you walk away, you don't hear it. And then you got some effects here which you can make your own, which is pretty cool, like fire, flares, fireworks even. There's a few other settings here with the layout. I don't really touch these, to be honest. And then you got physical 2D, and then you got physics normal, which don't use 2D in the normal, obviously, common sense. And then if you type at the top scripts, which I think is the most important thing on this game, is making your own script. And once you made your own script, you check it out, it should be there. It should be in a folder, so if you create a folder, call it scripts, and then drag it in. And normally, what I would normally do is make a few script folders just to make it nice and tidy. Sometimes I end up with 100, probably more, different scripts. And they all have different purposes. So as you can see, some of them are for controlling, some are for the player, some are for in-game, and some of them are for the level environment. So yeah, there's many different things you can make. So that's definitely important. So if we look here, I'm going to drag that into there, and then I'm going to open it. I'm not going to go through too much of the script. I would like to do that, but I might do that in the next tutorial. But just look in here, we've got start. Now start is basically anything that, as soon as you press that start button on the game, it'll run. So if you put 1 life, it'll give you 1 life, and that's it for the rest of the game. Where you got update. If you, for instance, add 1 life, which don't run this will not work because you need to reference it first. If you add 1 life, it won't add 1. It will add 1 every frame. So if you're running 30 frames per second, every second you will get 30 lives and it will continue forever, and it'll probably crash your computer, and you might lose your project that you're working on. So you must be careful, and you must save often. Don't stress with that one, because that is very, very challenging sometimes. I automatically hold Control and press S, which is automatically saves, which is important. So yeah, the idea of this tutorial is just to basically show you some basics on how the game works, because most of it you'll learn yourself through playing with things, but it's good to know what the basics are and where to find the information that you need, which is the asset store is one of the biggest. It's got everything on there. I mean, I used to download things just randomly, and I used to check them out. I used to look into them, I used to play them, and I used to see what they put in, and it's very, very confusing, but eventually it starts to come to your head and you feel better for it. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial really. But if you do have any questions or anything that you would like me to work on next, for instance scripts, games, even Blender, I don't mind, just give me a shout out, put it in the comments, and I'll get onto it instantly. Okay, well, for now, thank you for watching this video, and I hope you all the best. Take care.